Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next training session. My name is Jaroslav Valuch. I'm with Transitions, which is a media development organization based in Prague. And together with Journalism Fund Europe, we would like to welcome you to our next workshop, online session. This is not the first one and not the last one. I'm sure many of you were with us during the past workshops. We were focusing on different aspects of cross-border journalism, but not only that, the most recent workshop was focused on using AI tools in fact-checking AI-generated content, and we still have some more interesting topics in the pipeline for the upcoming weeks and months. So please stay tuned. Today, the topic that was in demand is focused on how to successfully pitch and publish a cross-border story. So it's my great pleasure to welcome two speakers today. As usually, we have two speakers because it can bring two different perspectives and information and experiences from experienced journalists, editors, and other practitioners. So we have around 90 minutes. The first presentation will be around 20 minutes. Then if you have any questions, feel free to ask. You can either use chat to post your question. You can post your question during the presentation. I'll keep an eye on that and I will make sure that the question is asked. And then we will follow up with the second presentation, and then the remaining time we can spend discussing. You can have questions on our guest speakers, but we will be also more than happy to hear from your experience, maybe what worked in your case, what didn't work, anything that you would like to share with others so that we make the session today as much useful as possible for everyone. So it's my great pleasure to welcome our two speakers. First one will be Olaya Argüeso Pérez, who is an experienced journalist and editor. Olaya will tell you more about her experience, but her perspective will be from the perspective of editor-in-chief, who is often being pitched by others, by journalists who are working on stories or cross-border stories. And she does have quite a rich experience of seeing some mistakes being done over and over again unnecessarily. So she will share some tips and guidance for you to what to do and what not to do when you are trying to pitch a story to a medium. And she will be followed by Ludovica Jona, who's an experienced journalist, and she will share her experience of a cross-border project, collaborative project, and how they ensured that the stories were published in the country, in the partner countries, and specifically she will focus on some case study from Italy, from her country, on how they were trying to achieve an impact of that story. So she will share lessons learned from Italy. All right, I think that's enough for the beginning. So please, Olaya, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for the invitation, Jaroslav. I'm really happy to be here with you, and hopefully I can share some insights that are interesting for you. So I'm going to share my screen, and let's hope that the tech works. Okay. Hopefully you can see my, you can see my
full screen,
my presentation. Okay, great. That's good. So wait a minute. Wait a second. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, a couple of things about myself. So I've been working as a journalist like for over 10 years now. 20 years now. Wait a second, please, because something is not working for me. So the way I would like it to work. So yeah. Are you watching my presentation right now? Can you see it? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
We can see the presentation, not the full screen.
Okay. Okay. Wait a minute. Yes. Now, as I mean, it's the last minute technical thing that it was working before, but started not working right now.
Sure, there's always something like
that. So as I was saying, thank you for having me here today. And I mean, I'm planning to share some insights with you about how to successfully pitch a cross-border story. So I mean, about myself. So, I mean, thank you for the nice introduction. Maybe a little bit more detail about myself. I've been working as a journalist for over 20 years. The first 10 years, a little bit more than a decade, I spent working for Cadena Ser, which is like the main. Okay. So I spent the first 10 years of my career working as a radio journalist in Spain, where I come from originally. I worked there for Cadena Ser, which is like the largest radio network. And I was working in mainly reporting about finance and business and economy. You may better know the newspaper that also belongs to the same publishing house, which is El País, which is, I think it's also the largest newspaper in Spain. After working for Cadena Ser, so the radio station, I moved for a short stint to the PR industry. But then I realized that where I really belonged to was journalism, not the PR industry. So as I like to say, I prefer to ask the questions instead of, having to answer them. So I decided I wanted back to journalism. The truth was that I realized I wanted to do something more than just what I've been doing traditionally as a journalist. So I decided, I decided to research a little bit which trends were back then in mode, so in vogue, so to say. And I discovered back then that data journalism was quite the hype in Spain. I'm talking about more than 10 years ago. So quite a while already. Now we know that data journalism is kind of, taken for granted somehow. But then, I decided, let's dig a little bit more into this new area of data journalism. And I really got enthusiastic about it. And after a certain point, after I reached a certain point, investigating in data journalism and learning about data journalism. I enrolled in the LEAD program at Columbia University, which is a really hands-on program to get really deeper into data journalism. And then I went back to Spain, and a year after that, that's where I got in touch with Correctiv. Or better said, Correctiv got in touch with me because they were looking for someone for their Cumex files investigation. Not sure if that's familiar with you, but that was a cross-border investigation. I would say almost the first well-known or best-known cross-border investigation by Correctiv, where we investigated very sophisticated tax fraud around dividends. The story, had already been told in Germany, but it was really new. This European perspective and this cross-border perspective was really new, because at the beginning it was thought that the fraud had only taken place in Germany, but it was really, as we showed, it was really a European tax fraud. And later on, we also discovered that it was actually it was happening globally, and that it had cost billions of euros to taxpayers, not only Europe, but also across the globe. And that's where I started. As I said, I got in touch with Correctiv, I started working with them. And then after this first investigation, I started working for them. First as a freelancer in Spain. And then in November 2019, I moved to Berlin. I joined the Berlin newsroom as editor-in-chief for international stories, as Jaroslav was saying. And I was taking care of all the cross-border investigations that Correctiv was taking part in. And for the last 2 years, I was focused on setting up a new project called Correctiv Europe, which is very broadly described a network of European local journalists working together on cross-border stories. So if you want, it's a kind of effort to kind of democratize the access to cross-border investigations and not leaving it only up to the largest outlets and the largest names, but also making it possible for local journalists to join this cross-border cosmos. So after this introduction about myself, I would like to know a little bit more about you. So the first thing that I would like to ask you is whether any of you plans to pitch a story. Maybe you can raise your hands. I mean, to pitch a story in the context of this, cross-border. I mean, not to your regular editor, but in this cross-border context. I don't know if you could maybe raise your hand so that I have a feeling of.
Or type it in the chat if you prefer. That
yeah.
might be the most straightforward. So if you're planning to do so, okay.
Okay. So a few. I mean, I cannot read the chat, but I see that the number of people writing is going up. So I guess a couple of you are already planning to pitch a story. So hopefully this session is useful for you. Then the next question would be, who has already pitched a story? Okay. At least one person. Okay, 2, 3. Okay. Good. So what I'm going to present is not only useful for pitching to editors, but it's also useful for asking for letters of intent. I know that, most of the people, or a lot of people, are planning to pitch stories when they are approaching editors in the context of a grant, of applying for a grant, so that they need to convince these editors to get these letters of intent that are usually part of the process. So, I mean, the tips that I'm going to give you would work in both contexts. Yes, pitching to editors for joining a cross-border investigation outside this context of asking for a grant, but it also will help you when asking for these letters of intent. So the first thing would be to plan enough time to pitch your story. And what I mean by that is, by no means, and I really would like to stress that, by no means contact or send your email to an editor 24 or 48 hours before the deadline is due. This is something that I experience a lot of times, but it's really really something that you should avoid to do. So really plan enough time to pitch your story. There are a certain number of reasons why you should do that. So first of all is that it shows little consideration for other people's times, other people's time. So it means that this editor-in-chief that you are writing in a rush may have other things to do. You may not be on the top of their priorities list because they may be working on other stories, they may be working on other projects. So it shows that you are in a hurry, but this person that you are asking for help in this case, but because it's somehow asking for help, it's not their problem if you are in a hurry. And as I said, it shows that you think maybe your time is more important than this person's time. So this is one of the reasons why you should avoid being so close to the deadline when asking for support from an editor or pitching the story for an editor. I mean, it also works if the deadline is another kind of deadline and not just asking for a grant. But in my experience, I've seen that many times whenever there was a grant deadline coming, that there was an increase of such contact efforts. Also, from my experience as an editor-in-chief, the fact that I'm being contacted with, such a short notice is for me a time management red flag, because it means to me, if this person, I mean, the thought that comes to my mind is that if this person hasn't been able, or this team hasn't been able to manage the time at a very basic step of the process, which is just, planning, where to get the money and how to contact people and when to contact people. My question would be, I mean, how are they going to manage a whole cross-border investigation with, partners involved, all the newsrooms involved, and with a, cross-border team involved? So for me, it was really a red flag about how this team or this person was going to manage their time. It also shows that you are desperate and you don't want to be seen as desperate, even if you are. You don't want, it's like they say about fear. You don't want others to smell your fear. You don't want to be perceived as desperate. Another thing is, or another reason why you should really plan time is that most of the editors that you are contacting, if they're already in this cross-border world, they would probably be, or they have been in the past in the same position as you are. So they know how things run, and they know that you have a list of partners that you have been contacting. And when you are contacted really a couple of days before the deadline is due, it means that you are running out of options. So it means that you are at the bottom of your list. And this conveys the feeling that the person is second best, that you are really running out of options and they are just at the really bottom of your list. And no one wants to be, second best to anyone. So that's another reason why you should plan enough time to pitch your story, even if you have, a long list of options to contact. And the last thing is that all this, this add up of showing little consideration and not being able to manage your time properly, and running out of options and so on, it really makes the impression that you are not professional. So even if you and this is important because it may not work with this editor this time, because maybe they are working on another story. They are for whatever reason it doesn't match. But it may work any other time. So you want to make a good impression. And on the other hand, even if it doesn't work for them, it may work for others, and they may recommend you to other editors. And if you are not making this good impression, all this contacting people for cross-border stories and all this cross-border work is based on trust. And not all these reasons why you should be planning pitching your story with enough time. Make you build this trust and look like you are a professional. So you avoid this negative impression that, believe me, this cross-border world is really small, even if you can feel that it's a lot of people. And then, I mean, the word spreads. So if you are perceived as someone that really, doesn't look professional, that may spread across, all the newsrooms that may be also on your list. So my solution to you is, please plan enough time for this part of the process, so that even if you are contacting the person at the bottom of your list, or the authors at the bottom of your list, they feel that there is enough time. Because another thing that they may want to do is to have a call with you. I mean, if they are really interested in the topic, they may want to set up a call with you, and you have to, leave enough time for that to happen, and just say, okay, let's meet tomorrow, as I said, in a rush. So my second tip for you would be something that it's this expression that it's, for instance, used in banking, which is know your customer, also known as KYC, which at the end of the day means that you really need to know who you're working with. So in the banking industry, this expression is used to say that you need to research your client to avoid working with someone that is criminal, and they are trying just to launder money. So in this case, applied to this situation, what I would say is that you have to do your homework, so to say. So when you're looking for an outlet, you have to research if this is the right outlet for your topic or for your story. So first of all, find out if this topic is relevant for this outlet, because this is something I've experienced many times, for instance, at Correctiv. Correctiv does a lot of things, but they do not publish human rights violations stories. And still, I have been contacted many times when I was there as an editor-in-chief, whether we were interested in such a story. So that showed me that, this person or this team didn't do their homework and didn't check what kind of stories Correctif did, because if you check the website, you can see that they don't do this kind of stuff. So this is, I mean, some of the pre-research work that you need to do. Another question that you need to ask yourself is whether the audience of this outlet that you are contacting is actually the right target group for your story, because it may be a complete mismatch. And this is something that you will only find out if you do this kind of pre-research question. Also, another thing that you have to keep in mind is that, I mean, it's really, I mean, you always have the temptation of going for the larger names. But sometimes a smaller place, a smaller community outlet may be the right partner for your story, because they may be able, I mean, Ludovica is going to talk more about impact, but a smaller community outlet that is addressing the right target group for your story may get you more impact. They may really, in the end, drive change in their community. And this is something that grant givers really look into. And maybe it's not so much about, you know, convincing, I don't know, the Guardian, Süddeutsche Zeitung, I don't know, about, you know, the large newsrooms, but really finding maybe your niche and the right, you know, the right outlet was, as I was saying, for this particular story. Also, another thing that you may want to do is to find out if the outlet that you're trying to contact already did some work on the kind of topic that you want to investigate, and if they and try to see how you, if they have already published, try to see how you can add to their previous work. And this is an example that I would like to show you about Correctif. And this is a very nice example, I think, of how this pre-research work did finally end up in a story that was published. So this was a group of young journalists that were working on a story on how Western rubber companies, I mean, companies working on, I mean, I don't know, producing tires and all that kind of stuff, so based on rubber, how they were driving deforestation and displacement in some areas in Cameroon, so of the indigenous population. And they knew that one of Correctiv's reporters, Gabriela Keller, was already working or had already been investigating supply chains of European companies and the consequences of how they dealt with them. So they researched with the work that Gabriela had been doing, and then offered this story to us, contacted us with this story, and precisely mentioned, I mean, we know that you have already been doing this work on supply chains, and we think this story could add to your work. And actually, in the end, it happened that the story was published because Gabriela had already a story, and this example of how actually it helped make the story more graphic, because the story was kind of bureaucratic, about the bureaucracy, about, you know, how a law has been was going to be approved in Brussels, and who was influencing this kind of lobbying to influence this law. And this example about Cameroon really showed how changes in this law could really, you know, end up being really a problem for the local population. So it was a very nice example. In the end, we published the story about you know, the lobbying part, and then showing this practical example of, you know, what was actually happening on the ground. So it was a very nice example of and a successful example of how to pitch a story, knowing that your work can add something to the work of the outlet that you are trying to contact. And then a very basic thing, which can be very obvious sometimes, but that we sometimes forget. Maybe this outlet does not do cross-border stories at all. Maybe we think they could be a good partner, but they are not used to that kind of work. And then maybe you're just, you know, hitting a wall because they don't know what it is, and maybe they are not interested, even if you think that it's amazing to do cross-border stories, but maybe they don't do that. So they are not the right partner for you. And then the language barrier, which is also something that when you work on this more international context, you may assume that everyone is able to communicate very proficiently in English. And this is not the case. I mean, I'm talking about Spain, for instance, where I come from. You cannot take it for granted that a journalist, you know, is able to really be proficient in English, and especially if you're investigating a topic where you really need to be very accurate with the language. You cannot take that for granted. So take that into account. Be sure that English is not going, communicating in English or in any other language is not going to be a problem. And if not, try to have someone in the team that speaks that language so that you really have no communication problems. Then my third tip for you would be that you do not underestimate the workload that the outlet publishing your story eventually will have to take up. This is also something that I've seen many times. This kind of message when they say, "No worries, you don't have so much work to do because we are doing all the job. We are all doing all the work, so you only have to publish our text." And this is also something that I've heard many times. So please never say, "No worries, we are doing all the work," because this is not how it works. In the end, any platform, any outlet publishing a story is liable for whatever they publish. So they really need to be sure that whatever they are publishing is really matching their standards. And this is a process that you have to go through, whatever it is. I mean, no one is going to publish the story that you are investigating just as it goes out of your computer. No one is going to publish that. Everyone is going to do, an auditing of your story. So you have to understand your partner's needs. So you have to understand that they will need to, that they're going to ask a lot of questions, that they may be editing your text, that they need to do a lot of fact checking, as I said, because they are liable for whatever they publish, and that they are going to ask a lot of questions about how are you reaching your conclusions, where are you, the proof of concept of what you are writing, who are your sources, and so on. They are also to strongly edit your text or your article or your piece. So embrace those changes. And be ready to understand that they have their own writing styles, their own style guides, and that you have to, if you're going to publish with them, that they really, you need to stick to those guidelines. And this is no negotiable. So that you have to be open to accept how other media work. And a little bit in line with that, get familiar with their internal processes. So understand what they need, which are their internal production processes and what they need to, get a text finally published. And once again, if you understand your partner's need, you're also showing that you know how this business works, and it also shows that you are professional. And once again, this professionalism that you're showing in this process is basic to set the foundations of the trust that, as I was saying, is the keystone for starting working with someone in this cross-border investigations or in this cross-border environment, if you want. So just summing up, reach out to outlets with enough time. Look for the best match for your story and not just, the flashy names, because maybe a smaller outlet will give you more attention and more love and maybe, more impact also. And then accept the challenges of working collaboratively. As I said, embrace what it takes to work with other people that may have different working standards as you do. So thank you very much for having me, and hopefully this has been of help for you, for all of you who are planning to pitch a story. And I'm happy to answer your questions and hear your feedback. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Olaya, for your checklist and for your tips. Now, before we move to the second presentation, please feel free to ask any questions or, add any comments, either by unmuting yourself, or you can post your question or comment in the chat and I will read it out loud. So if we have any questions already or comments, please go ahead. Might be still typing them. Okay, so we have a question from Beatrice. How long should be the pitch for the editors?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's not about the length. It's about convincing them that that you have already a story, because this is also a mistake that it's very common. Is like, I mean, I would like to, or we would like to investigate this topic. I mean, you really need to approach editors when you already have some pre-research, like you really already started working on a story. And I think that also works for the grant givers. They want to see that you have already done some work, and they have already found some material or some conclusions that are interesting. Obviously, they know that, I mean, journalism needs this process of going through the story and then really proving your hypothesis. But you need to have a hypothesis that an editor can really see through and think if it really matches their interest and their outlet, as I was saying. But I mean, you have to find them. It's a you know a difficult balance, but you should find a way to tell the core of your story without giving out too much, so that you're also keeping, but you need to keep them interested. So you really need to, I mean, not just general story like, I don't know, we have a story on immigration in the Mediterranean. I mean, this is, for me, that's not a pitch. So a pitch is that you, I mean, I don't know, you investigated a case in a border, in a specific border, and that you know about a company that has been, I don't know, infringing or doing human rights violations, as I was saying, for instance, as an example. And even you don't have to name the company, you don't have to, to tell too much, but at least you have to reveal the core of the investigation, why this investigation. I mean, the kind of questions that I think any editor would ask, which is, I mean, why is this relevant? Why I should be interested in this story? So for me, it's not about the length. It's about, is it interesting or not? And is this a story for my outlet or not? Hopefully I answered your question.
Thank you. And now a similar question, going more in how detailed a pitch should be. And is there a risk if it will be stolen? So you touched upon that, but please, if you can expand on that, Olaya.
Yeah, as I was saying, so you can, I mean, you can give details about what the story is about without giving names, without saying, for instance, I mean, going back to this example of, for instance, migration and I don't know, maybe problems happening at a border. You can describe the problem without telling which country it is or which company is involved or whatever, so that you're really showing, I mean, or saying that you have testimonies of people affected, that you have documents showing the violations. So really, showing that you have done the job, that you know what you're talking about, but you don't have to, give details about sources, countries, companies, or whatever, so that even if so that you can convey this image that you have done the job, so that you have a story, but that you obviously don't want to reveal too many details without having an answer from this outlet. And then something that is very useful, I mean, this is already, it would be a next step once the pitch has been accepted, which is send them an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. I think, I mean, most of the editors are comfortable with that, because it's something that it's very common in investigative journalism, which is, this agreement that you are, I mean, that even if you're not publishing the story, you are not going to steal it. I mean, obviously you never, I mean, they can also do it. I mean, it's not that they are liable if you can, I mean, probably cannot take them to court, but it's a kind of a, I don't know, ethical standard. And I think, I mean, most of these cross-border investigations are based, or part of the process is to sign an NDA to make sure that we all know that this is confidential and that there are certain standards that have to be respected. And once again, it's about trust. And this NDA is not like you are not, I mean, it shows that also once again, it shows professionalism. It shows that you know which are the risks, and that you are, that you are aware that this is a thing, and that this is also standard in the industry, actually.
Okay, thank you, Olaya. So we will move to our next presentation, but if you still will have some questions or comments, please keep posting them in the chat. And maybe also I would like to ask you, excuse me, in the meantime, if you have any experience in pitching the story, good or bad one, that you would like, some lesson that you would like to share with others, please feel free to write about it and share your story about pitching the story. It might be something useful. So please use the chat to do so. So let's move to our second speaker, Ludovica. She will share more insights on how to publish a story that has some impact and what impact actually means in this case. So please, Ludovica.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. So this is okay. Okay, these are my slides. Hi everybody. So my name is Ludovica Iona. I'm an Italian journalist based in Rome. I have around 8 years experience as a coordinator of cross-border journalism investigations, funded by JournalismFund, Investigative Journalism for Europe, which is the program of the European Commission, and also European Journalism Center. And my investigations in the past were published by Italian media, TV, radio, but also transnational and international media such as The Intercept, Mediapart, Le Monde, British Medical Journal, La Jornada, and this publication, of course, in collaboration with other journalists of the team. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the impact of an investigation, what does it mean, and taking as an example a case of the last investigation, cross-border investigation I coordinated, which is called The Business of Madness. And it is an investigation which involved 6 journalists in 4 European countries, so Italy, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands. So I'm going to focus more on the impact in Italy, which is my country, so the publication were in all the 4 countries involved. The focus of this investigation was the neglect, the patients, psychiatric patients, and neglected in residential psychiatric institutions, the abuse of physical and pharmacological restraints, the business of the madness entrepreneurs. So who are the madness entrepreneurs? According to our investigation, they are the owners of companies which manage psychiatric residential institutions, which receive public money, but not enough checks, not enough control from the state administrations, and as a consequence, they don't provide a good care, for rehabilitation of psychiatric patients, and the result is neglect of patients and their abandonment. And the result is also a business, because if you don't spend enough on the care, you can make more profit. So let's go to talk about definitions. In journalism, we can say that that impact is when we make a change, we make the difference, we manage to hold the power into account, to raise awareness, to help the people to better understand how, the world where they live. And these impacts can be in the short term and in the long term. Short-term impacts include informing new audiences about an issue, but also mobilizing target audience to take actions, like with petitions, letters, events, etc. Longer-term impacts are changing social attitudes, changing public policies or laws. Of course, we have to underline that long-term impacts require multiple efforts over time by many different actors and stakeholders. So the investigation I'm going to talk to you about, the impact are still in the short-term impacts, even because we published 6 months ago, and but we are going to try to go further a little bit, and so let's talk about the investigation. The story of this investigation, maybe also the strength of this investigation, and it is how it started. So it started with a personal story, actually. Wait, yeah? Can I go? Oh, questions? Okay. For many years, I visited a relative who lived in a psychiatric residential facility in my region near Rome. And what I saw was striking. I mean, what I saw is for years neglect of patients. They were just left full of drugs, doing nothing all the day, just smoking cigarettes, all the time asking for cigarettes, often dirty with their urine. And this was a facility funded with public funding. And at that moment, when my relative was inside there, I could do nothing because of fear of consequences on this person. So when she went out, we managed to find a totally private facility, and I hadn't anymore this connection with this facility. I mean, many facilities, because patients, they change from one another. But what the ones I visited, they had all the same conditions that I just described. So when this person went out, I felt that I had to make an investigation. I was a journalist. I had to go further, and there was a moment in which I decided it. And I just pasted this Instagram story on the slide, because when we realized the podcast from this investigation, there was a psychologist just mentioning the moment in which I decided to make the investigation. It was when I listened to a patient in his 40s in this facility, and it was his birthday. He was talking with her mother. And he was, "Mama, when I go out from here, don't you see that the longer I stay here, the crazier I become?" And in that moment, I thought, oh, maybe this person is mad, but what he says is absolutely, I can absolutely share it, because I would become mad if I lived more than 2 years as he was in that situation. So that was at the time an uncovered story, totally uncovered, because the people who know this situation are the people like I was. So people in fear of consequence for their dearest ones if they denounce. And also in my region, there is this situation that the owners of these psychiatric facilities, many of these psychiatric facilities, are also often the owners of main national editorial groups. They are very important families, so maybe this is another reason why this was an uncovered topic. So, our first publication. First of all, I want to say that from that, my feeling of being like powerless, we end up like in the last months, that this story was listened by thousands and thousands of people and shared in the social media a lot. So the sense of powerless, like it became like the strength to publish and to change the situation, at least regarding publication. Anyway, first publication in Italy was in the main Italian newspaper, and it was about physical restraint of people in psychiatric hospitals, including children. And it was the first time in 8 years, but the newspaper received letters asking to dig more, to investigate more, because investigating, I didn't know at the beginning of the investigation that even children were tied to bed, were physically restrained in such big percentage. For example, I discovered that 80% of the children recovered in psychiatric department of hospitals of the Pope in Rome, the 8%, not 8%, they were tied to bed. So there were many requests of investigate more, and this is a good sign, I think, because it means that people are interested. They really want to know more. So these are the letters. One of these letters asked for more information and confirm what she saw in this hospital and confirm what was written in the article. The second publication was on Il Fatto Quotidiano, which is independent and the most independent news outlet in Italy. And so we could publish the investigation about the madness entrepreneurs, so the companies, giving the names. So we can see here the names of the companies. They are linked to Domani, which is a very good newspaper, but also Repubblica, which is maybe the first newspaper in Italy, and Angelucci is linked to the other 3 newspapers of the right wing. And I think that for the fact that we mentioned for the first time publicly the name of the owners of these facilities, and also there was, of course, association saying that quite general, nearly all of them, there is this situation of doing nothing all the day. I mean, of course, what I experienced was confirmed by many sources. And I think maybe for this reason, I knew that 2 people I interviewed were later sanctioned by the region because the doctors in Italy, they depend, the physicians, the psychiatrists, they depend on the region, even if they were in hospitals and so on. So in this case, the impact maybe could be not so positive, at least for the people interviewed, but it means that there was an impact. So then our third publication, and I think that this was the driver of the impact of this investigation, a podcast. A podcast that was really, really, successful in, if I compare with other publications I did in the past, because it was the first time that my investigation was mentioned by other newspapers, other journalists, influencers. Also, for example, she is a wine influencer. So if a wine influencer wants to talk about psychiatric departments, psychiatric hospitals, and of sad stories that I told you about, I mean, it means that something happened. And this is another influencer with 1 million followers, and she is Questioni d'Orecchio, is a newsletter about podcasts, and she writes something that I really dreamt of, because she said this podcast, very engaging, is the occasion, the opportunity to know more of a reality that everybody should know about. But yeah, our podcast was reached it was the 12 more listeners for some weeks in Italy. And it was very surprising to me, because I repeat, it was a story that I was really nearly afraid to talk about to my friends, for the fear maybe to bore them, to be too depressive. And now all this success seems like incredible. So maybe the trick why it was so successful, apart of course of the quality of the podcast producer that we had, Piano P, is that we linked to the investigation about this depressing topic to an intriguing story. And in this case, the intriguing story was the historical reconstruction of the revolution that in the 60s and 70s led to the closure of large psychiatric asylums in Italy by prominent psychiatrist Franco Basaglia, Italian psychiatrists that who also had impact with his theory and practice also in other European countries and other also in Latin America and other even out of Europe. And the fact I think that helped us is that everyone in Italy knows about Basaglia. The podcast is called It's All Basaglia's Fault. And everybody has heard like the saying, it's all about Basaglia's fault, because he closed the asylum. And everybody, many people say, the mad people are on the street because of the Basaglia. And like sometimes also in a negative way, but that was so a provoking title, provocative name for the podcast. And but so everybody has heard about him, but very few know what he did and his practice and theory of rehabilitation based on freedom of patients and on the answer to people's social needs. It's something that works very well, and we proved it in the podcast, and we brought experience and so on. Then other aspects that helped us to be so impactful with the podcast were to a social media campaign by the producer, but most I think that the other two publications were linked to the podcast. So articles on Corriere and articles on Il Fatto Quotidiano linked the podcast, mentioned the podcast as a tool to know more about the investigation. Corriere della Sera in its website also published the 8 episodes and produced and sent a newsletter just dedicated to the podcast. And in the end, a chance. So the year that we published the investigation was also the year of 1 century from the birth of Franco Basaglia. So of course there were like other celebrations and publications that increased the interest on him. But what I can tell you is that everybody listened to the podcast. Maybe she was interested to Basaglia, but then said, well, the most interesting part of the podcast was the one of the investigation about current situation. So we just attracted with his name and then managed to spread the content of our articles. So the impact of the publication after 6 months is over 150 single podcast listeners, tens of thousands of readers, articles, social media contents, 12 articles on various media, written and radio, mentioning the podcast, and also invitations to events, a lot, organized by associations, university groups. Also, the main opposition political party invited us, and me and my colleague. You can see the picture. This is the cover of a radio program just dedicated to the podcast, and this is a poster of an event organized by students at the University of Rome, psychology students, which was very important for us because, they are students of the subject we are talking about. But also students from architecture invited us because, mental health is something that it's we found that very interesting, especially for young people. In fact, this radio program was called Z Generation, dedicating to young people. We received a lot of letters of people with psychiatric disease, their relatives, psychologists, and I think, and we also value these testimonies also for future investigation, future projects. And also received a proposal, and we accepted it, of course, for a book to be published on the podcast by the Mondadori is maybe the main or one of the main editorial groups in Italy. So the book is going to be published next year. So the future, and we are trying to work for long-term impact and doing more publication. There is a new project funded by EJ4U this time, also with a French colleague, because there are multinational companies investing in psychiatric care in Italy, Spain, and France. And one of the main companies is French. And we also, I'm collaborating with associations. The objective is to bring this topic to conferences with members of parliament at national level to try to have a real impact in the law, because there is being discussed a law on this topic, and spread the content of the investigation through book presentations, of course, and also work as much as possible with people affected by the issue. I conclude this presentation saying that if any one of you is interested to collaborate in this topic or just have questions, can also write me, and we can see if we can collaborate.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ludovica. If you're okay with that, you can post your email in the chat, or we can share it if anyone asks for that. I'm leaving this up to you. Thank you very much for a very inspiring case study and presentation. And we do already have a question from Federica. She asked how much of this came after publication, and how much you planned and included in the grant application. And if I may expand the question with my question, is also like, what was the story of the pitching, or the pitching the story, right? So how did you get it published first? What steps did you take to get it published? And we can get to the podcast later.
Okay, if I have to tell you the truth, I started that I already wanted to make the podcast. It was in my mind, and I wanted the money for an investigation, because in Italy we don't have funding. So, but I knew that, of course, this problem of psychiatric patients is for sure, and I studied this, of course, in documents that this could be a problem in many countries. So I contacted colleagues who had already worked on, if not on psychiatric patients, because this is very rare. For example, the first person I contacted is Maria Maggiore from Investigative. She also works for Investigative Europe, of course. She's a member of the team, and she worked on elderly people, the business of elderly people. So I knew that this kind of business is very similar. So then she introduced me to other journalists already experienced in this topic, so like Manuel Rico, Catherine Spickerman, and I also involved another Italian colleague that has already worked on this topic, because I knew that it's very specific. In general, this is what I do when I present cross-border projects. I contact people, other colleagues that are already quite expert, because then it's easier to work together. So, what was the other question? Sorry.
Yeah. Generally, like how much you included in
Yes.
the application
The podcast,
already.
yeah, the podcast was not included in the project because it would have been too expensive. And at the beginning, I thought that it could not be included. I mean, a podcast like this, it costs around 10,000 euros. I was sure that I had gained the budget, but I didn't. But we were lucky. I presented the project to various grants, but I didn't receive it. But in the end, the producer was so in love with the project that say, okay, I will pay for it. So yeah, it was a chance. So what was included in the grant was the investigation, but without the investigation, the podcast would have been impossible. Also, some trips that I did and interviews that I used in the podcast were included in the grant.
Thank you. But at that stage, you had already a lot of information collected and a lot of insights and data, right? When you were
Yeah. When I did the podcast, I had already done the investigation, but then we publish it together so that we can enforce the article got listeners to the podcast, and yeah, probably yes, this direction.
Thank you very much. So, any other questions or comments or stories of yours? Please feel free to share. I actually have one more question, and maybe it's a silly question, and I'm not a journalist, so apologies. But I mean, there was this interesting moment of like influencer helping to spread the content, right, and the story. So maybe my question is on you, Ludovica, and Olaya as well. Like, what is the role? I mean, in these days with some influencers, I mean, I know it's not about like pitching a story also when it's already published to an influencer to spread it, but in some cases there might be influencer in that specific field that might help to spread the content and spread the message. So maybe if you have any thoughts, experiences of like the role of influencers in helping to make a better reach or maybe better stronger impact. If Ludovica, Olaya, if you have any thoughts on that, I would be curious to hear.
I don't have experience in the sense that I'd never asked to these influencers to spread the podcast. What I can say, because there were some moments in which the producers say, "Oh, we had like a jump in the listeners," but what I understood is that Spotify is our influencer, because it happened something like that. For example, I have a chat in my co-working space and I sent the link to the podcast, but not many people answer. Nice. After, I don't know, 2 weeks or 1 month, one of the people of the co-workers say, but you are the author of Tutta colpa di Basaglia. Nice, I listened to that. So she didn't listen because I've sent the link, but she listened because Spotify suggested to her. So, and then it's true that we also have an interview to a singer in the last episode, a singer who had quite famous, that he also wrote a song about pre-med people, psychiatric patients and so on. And he shared it on Facebook, but I don't really think that this was what moved. I think that the important thing for podcasts is that there is a moment in which you push at the beginning a lot, so that Spotify, I mean, it's not only Spotify, but if people likes it, they put a good review, because there is this review thing that I don't know, because I never asked for reviews, but I know that the reviews are very high. And of course, the production, we had a great producer, because he was in love with the story, and yeah, we were lucky, I know.
Thank you. Olaya, any thoughts on this, or
Yeah, obviously, I mean, there is the role of algorithms, and obviously you cannot influence them. I mean, you may get a hint of how they work, but I mean, they keep it under wraps usually because it's like commercial properties that you really never know how you can influence an algorithm for a platform. But one thing that can be and should be, if you have enough time, when planning to pitch a story for a grant or to an editor, and this is something that we did at Correctiv, and then most of investigations do, and especially cross-border is also a field where you can do that, is to plan which are the multiplicators that can help you spread the word. So, I mean, if you have enough time, that should be part of your dissemination, the dissemination phase of your investigation. So once you plan, you've done your investigation, you've published it. So before publishing, you really should be already thinking about, okay, who are the people who can really push the story? You call them multiplicators. So it's like the people, not only influencers, but people that are really, so they may not be like mainstream influencers, but they may be influencers on this topic in particular. So, obviously, if you have like a mainstream influencer supporting your story, okay, that's like bingo. But you can also go for for people that are really a reference, that are a known name on the topic that you're talking about, so that you can also reach kind of audience that you want to spread the word about your work.
Okay, thank you very much. So, unless there are other questions, we will conclude today. So thank you very much, Olaya and Ludovica, for sharing your experiences and insight. I mean, it was very inspirational. I do believe that it brought some interesting tips and highlights. Eva, you turned on your camera. Do you have a question, or you wanna just say hi?
I just wanted to say bye because I know I'm sorry, Olaya, when you were asking some questions, I couldn't turn on the camera, but I know how it is. So I just wanted to show that I am here, for example, and I'm sure the others are there as well. No, so thanks, Jaro.
Yeah, good to see you. That's fine. That's fine. So thank you very much, everyone. Please expect a follow-up email. We will share the slides with you and the recording and with information about what's next. And I see Beatrice, so you do have a question? And you were afraid if it doesn't come across as weird? Well, no, certainly. So please ask. If you can turn on your microphone so that we can hear you, please feel free to ask. If anybody needs to leave already, please, that's fine. Beatrice, so what's your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, it's more maybe kind of sharing one experience that I had. Once I sent one pitch to an editor, and they first replied saying that the story was interesting, but then they didn't reply anymore to my emails. I understand the editors are really busy usually, so but like how should one interpret this kind of feedback, not feedback? Like saying first that they are interested, maybe they have to check. Also, they have their own agendas with the outlet and so on. But so what would be like a suggestion for this kind of situation? Would it be better to kind of keep pushing a little bit or just leaving it and take it as a no?
Thank you, Beatrice. It's certainly not a weird question. So maybe Olaya, from your perspective.
Yeah, I would say just keep pushing, because there may be a lot of things happening. So I don't know. As I said, you have to think that this person, this editor, has their own job, and you are just like an extra thing that comes on top of everything. So there may be there may be personal reasons. Maybe they have a personal problem. There is, I don't know, like the company is going through turmoil, but there's an internal thing that you never will learn about. There are so thousands of factors that could be influencing the fact that they are not getting back to you. So I think I wouldn't take it as as bad taste or whatever to push a little bit. I think it's the same way that you would do, I don't know, with any, like a source that is not getting back to you and you really need that. So I would just very politely get back to them and say, hey, you mentioned that it was interesting, but I've never heard back from you again. Could you maybe give me a hint if this is still interesting? If not, I would also understand it, but it would help to, have a confirmation or a final reaction in any direction it is, but at least to have, this certainty if and also saying, okay, if it's not interesting, I would also like to know so that I can stop bothering you, whatever. I mean, so in a very polite way, you can really push, and I wouldn't say it's, it's a problem.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, and please let's stay in touch. There's going to be more workshops and trainings coming up. So enjoy your day. Thank you very much, Olaya. Thank you very much, Ludovica. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.